Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Living with and Beyond Cancer. My name is Steve Poynton from Steve Poynton Counselling and Support. This is a podcast for people who have or have had cancer. As a twice diagnosed kidney cancer patient who has been in remission for 8 years, I recognise the trials and tribulations of what happens next once we've finished treatment or are in long-term maintenance treatment and try and return to our lives. If you want to know more about myself and why I'm doing this podcast, please go back to episode 1, released on World Cancer Day on the 4th of February 2026. Today I'm joined by somebody who I've followed on social media for a little while and somebody who works with an organisation called Mission Remission. And that organisation means a lot to me as their work really resonates with my experiences and thoughts. I'm delighted today to welcome Charlotte Rutherford to the podcast. But before we get on to the episode, I would really like to say a few words about a sponsor of the show, the Resilience Room. If you heard a previous episode of the podcast, you would have heard Dr. Alex Turner and myself discuss the importance of the Resilience Room and how it can help employers support their staff with their mental health and how to cope with loss and grief in specific work environments. The Resilience Room is a training company offering a number of in-person training courses. Too much training these days has become a tick box online bore, but the Resilience Room understands the power of getting in the room with each other. Current courses on offer include Wellbeing in the Workplace and Loss and Grief. All courses are bespoke and can be tailored to your needs of your employees. Please have a look at the Resilience Room website on www.resilienceroom.co.uk. So a little while ago I mentioned the name of today's guest, Charlotte. Would you like to introduce yourself, Charlotte? Where are you from? What do you do, etc.?
Well, firstly, thank you for having me on. I was really pleased that you wanted to hear my story and to be invited, so thank you. I'm Charlotte. I am 32 and I live just outside of Bristol. As you said before, I currently work at Mission Remission. So Mission Remission is a cancer charity who support cancer survivors in life beyond treatment, so all of the unknowns that come with remission. But as well as that, I'm involved in, different projects for peer support and patient advocacy. So I look at a lot of different things to hopefully help other people who have been through something similar to what I have. But also, I guess I should probably say that I'm currently in remission from stage 4 metastatic colon cancer as well. So I guess that diagnosis is what's led me here today.
Yeah, all of the above, I guess, is what's brought you here. I mean, really looking forward to hearing about some of the work that you do with Mission Remission and away from that. But let's start with you, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I believe we're going to go back to 2020, a period of time where none of us are going to forget in a hurry. COVID. What was happening for you and how did you end up in the situation you were?
Yeah, so January 2020, probably aside from everything going on with COVID and the build up to COVID, was probably when I started to first notice a build up of my own symptoms that I was having. It did start more kind of sporadically at the beginning of 2020, and I was living and working in Australia where I'd been for a few years. I was sponsored to work there. Before my diagnosis, I was living a completely different life. Throughout the year, I was kind of feeling more and more unwell with symptoms like, it was all stomach issues, really bad periods of vomiting after eating, losing weight, having really severe stomach pain. And as I said at the start of the year, it was I was noticing it on and off. As the year kind of progressed, it was becoming more and more obvious. And I was going to doctors and in and out of hospitals while I was in Australia, and I was trying to get answers. And some of those answers were things like, you hear quite often, it could have been stress. I think a stomach ulcer was given at one point, acid reflux. Never was suggested that it could have been anything more serious than that. In fact, actually, at one point when I went into hospital, again, trying to get answers, really unwell, I was actually told that because my symptoms didn't really add up to anything serious, as they guessed, that it probably wouldn't be anything serious and I could be rest assured that it wasn't anything serious. So that was just a few months before I was diagnosed, but that was kind of developing throughout the whole of 2020 really. And I was becoming, just struggling with not getting any answers, and they didn't want to do any scans. So that was how my year was playing out, really.
That sounds really traumatic in itself, but I don't know what the health system was like in Australia during COVID, but if it was anything like the UK, it'd be really difficult to get into hospital in the first place. So that's another battle I assume you were having to run.
Yeah, I mean, the healthcare system over there was in a bit of a better place than the NHS was. And actually, that was something that formed a later decision with treatment, but it was in a slightly better place. I think that I came up some unique challenges in terms of while I was in Australia, I also went to various different places, partly because my sister lives over there and lived somewhere different to where I was living, and I went to live with her. So I was going to different hospitals. So, as well as COVID and an influx of patients in doctors and hospitals, I was also seeing different people as well. So a whole load of, I think, issues came up at the same time for me.
So you mentioned throughout the year, where did this sort of start to come to a head? Because 12 months, clearly deteriorating, struggling. What happened next?
So it was in December, and I was really at the worst that I'd been. I think at that point I hadn't actually eaten properly for about a month and a half. So obviously, as you can imagine, I was very delirious. I'd lost a lot of weight, and my family back in England, and also my friends who, luckily, I had good friends over there, but my friends there were becoming really worried. I had just about managed to get an emergency appointment for a colonoscopy, but actually, luckily and thankfully, just a few days before that, my friends were like, enough's enough. We're going to take you into hospital again. And I didn't have high hopes because I'd been in so many times with no answers, but they were like, enough really is enough. And they took me into hospital in Melbourne. And I think that time, just because I was so visibly unwell and also things like my heart rate were over double what they should have been and everything, they really finally took me seriously. And it was at that point that they did a CT scan. And that CT scan found a complete obstruction on my colon. And that was when it all turned really serious, to be honest. It felt like I blinked and suddenly everything was being taken seriously, and I was in emergency surgery within 24 hours.
I mean, this might be stating the obvious, but that sounds a horrific ordeal to be the other side of the world to your family and anything that's vaguely familiar, I guess, to be told you had colon cancer, having been dismissed so many times, feeling so unwell as well. How do you cope with that, Charlotte, at that particular point?
I'm trying to remember like how I really did feel like I could. I think at that point, when you're first diagnosed, I guess it's that whole thing of you're facing so many appointments or decisions already in terms of, what happens next, treatment and everything like that. And you're around healthcare people all the time. I felt like I was constantly having to think about the next thing anyway, what was coming up. So I guess that probably kept me occupied. The fact that I didn't have my family there, and for a while, until I was kind of given reassurance that luckily it wasn't that serious, for a while I really did think that I was going to die in that room in Melbourne, in that hospital room. And I think that that in itself was pivotal in terms of, I guess, how I live my life now, but processing it at the time, I guess my brain being busy with what comes next. I think, I made sure I did things like acupuncture to give me that time of zen, but I think mindset as well. Like, I think people around me can also vouch for the fact that naturally, I guess I am a fairly positive person. And I think, and yeah, I don't mean the positivity where you kind of brush everything aside, but the mindset was huge. And I think without that, I probably could have crumbled, but just trying to have hope and I guess a bit of faith in a really dark time got me through.
I hear there that your own sort of mindset helped massively, but I also heard you say something that I hear a lot in my work, in advocacy work, and I'm sure you do. When you're diagnosed and then there becomes a plan, you automatically end up on a conveyor belt, don't you?
Yeah.
You got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this, and then what comes next is anybody's guess, but you get swept along with that conveyor belt at the start.
Yeah, and I think that it probably then leads into how people describe it as your journey kind of progresses and you get into like remission, for example, you're suddenly without all of that because at that point when you're first diagnosed, you are constantly surrounded by people all the time giving you their advice and giving you the answers. You basically, I think, hand yourself over to them and you have to just trust them that they'll look after you in the best way. But you are just in and out cycle of hospitals, I guess.
Absolutely. So you're on the other side of the world. You're about to have major surgery. Were you any of your family able to come over because of COVID or anything like that?
No, because I just so happened to be in the one country that shut all of their borders and that you needed like a permission exemption to fly into, which took months. So no, they didn't. The only kind of saving grace I had really was that one of my sisters does live in Australia. But again, she lives in a completely different part, and they'd shut the borders between states as well. So there was like windows of time that you're allowed to come. So she managed to come and see me twice, once when I first started treatment and one at the end as well. So that got me through. But apart from that, no, I didn't have any of my family there.
You were quite young to be diagnosed with colon cancer. Is that common at that sort of age, or is it something that's for that particular cancer that's more prevalent in older people?
Yeah, so I was 26 when I was first diagnosed, and they think that it had actually been growing for 3 to 5 years before that. Which, if you think that my symptoms really only started about a year, maybe a year and a half, like very small before, that's actually quite terrifying that I was so young and had this without knowing. And I think it is becoming increasingly common. I think bowel cancer is actually one of the highest growing rates for having it in young people. And I think that, obviously I'll go more, I guess, into patient advocacy that I do, but it's one of the reasons why I try to raise awareness, because it's not just an older person's cancer anymore. It is becoming increasingly common, and I think that the quicker that we can try and make people understand that, the more positive outcomes we'll get.
Yeah, and I guess the new legislation in this country wouldn't help you in Australia, I know, but that if you present at the doctors or the GPs twice with the same situation,
Yeah.
the third time they have to start doing tests and taking it seriously, and that's got to be a must, hasn't it, for everybody?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Because I think that without that, I think the only thing I think that goes against, patients in that respect is when sometimes your symptoms are showing in a completely different in a way, and different symptoms are coming at different times. But definitely that's a must, because it just it protects people's voice.
Yeah, and especially when you don't ever see the same GP when you go to the doctors, you very often
Yeah.
get somebody completely different who you have no relationship with. So yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
it's definitely an improvement. So you had your surgery. How long did that take to recover, and sort of what happened next? Was there any treatment plan for after that?
Yeah, so I had the surgery. I was kept in hospital for 11 days. I think I got out just in time for Christmas. The recovery was rough, to be honest, but that was partly because I'd become so unwell beforehand that it took me a while just to, they had to get all the nutrients and electrolytes and stuff back in me. But yeah, it was big. It was major, and I lost a lot of strength as well. So it was about rebuilding that physically and mentally, I guess, I suppose, as well. And then it almost instantly, obviously, the discussion around treatment was talked about, and this was one of the most difficult decisions I faced, because obviously I was already in Australia away from my family. Treatment, I made the decision to stay in Australia for my treatment, and that was simply because I knew that the healthcare system was in a bit of a better place. And so I had to put my health first. But yeah, I made the decision to stay there for chemotherapy, which I started at the end of January. So it was about a month after I'd had the operation. I'd recovered for the whole 6 weeks, and I did 4 rounds of 3 weekly cycles of chemo that was on the drip, and oral tablets as well. Yeah, that was kind of what came next for me while I was over there.
That's brutal. 4 cycles of 3 week of chemotherapy is absolutely
Mm.
brutal.
Hmm. Yeah, it was like, I remember that the first week I reacted really until it was actually a bit at the end of the fourth cycle. I'd got the sickness meds and stuff down pat, and I felt so much better. The first two cycles I didn't. So at the end of the fourth one, I was like, oh, I could have done another one now because I got the sickness meds down pat. But the first couple were rough. I reacted really badly to the drip, but the tablets and everything, I remember the first week was always really bad. Second week, I felt a little bit more human. And the third week, I could kind of felt like me again. So I made the most of that and went out and did things as normal. But the rest of the time, I was in bed, really. And it took a long time to get the sickness meds right.
So you're on the other side of the world. I know you said you were sort of sponsored to be over there. If it's not too personal, how were you coping in Australia? How did you cope financially?
I had been on a sponsored visa, so obviously I have been working. I actually had to switch on to a medical visa, so that's something else that I had to go through while I was on treatment and everything, lodging of that. Beforehand, I'd obviously been working, and actually, the way that work had kind of gone the previous year, so in 2020, as I was getting more ill, I ended up having to stop work. But because of some circumstances in work and everything like that, I actually received a payout from work that arrived in one like lump sum, which I got into my bank just before I'd gone into hospital. Um, and that for me was a lifesaver, really, in terms of my finances, because it just gave me a little bit of a comfort blanket, and it meant that I didn't have to work and I wasn't working throughout treatment and everything, but I could still live with obviously some support as well from my family. But I didn't receive any financial support while I was over there. So if I didn't have that payment, I don't know what I would have done really.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard enough, isn't it, in this country when you suddenly end up out of work because of cancer to fight the system here. But when you, I guess, I think Australia are quite strict on who's entitled to resource from their government. That's, I can well hear the lifeline that payout from work was.
Mm-hmm. You know, when you kind of look back on things and you think about how timing works out, and I always think about that payment, and I think, wow, like I was very, very lucky to have had that what I did because, and even with that, yeah, I still had to be really careful, you know, without anything more coming in and being in a different country and not wanting to rely on family, even though you obviously I could, but I still had to be careful. I couldn't go out and spend without knowing that anything was coming in. So it was a balancing act.
Difficult, a really difficult part of your life as well. So you've had 4 cycles of 3 weeks of chemo. So what's that? 4 months?
Yeah, 12 weeks it
Yeah.
was.
What happened next?
So finished chemo and started my remission in April, 6th of April, I remember. And I celebrated with the people that I had over there that was close. I said my sister did come down for that as well, which was nice. So that was huge relief to have finished chemo. And I also knew that that was when I was looking to go back to the UK, which I did. I went back to the UK in the end of April so I could be with my family again because I felt at that point like I probably wasn't going to need to rely on healthcare as much then, so I felt safer to go back then.
Straightforward to come back with the health conditions and easy to transfer your sort of hospital care.
It was. I'm so lucky to have had a really, really good GP back where I've grown up, and he was really good. And yeah, I do think that that probably presented some challenges. I think kind of like going from Australia to this healthcare, I probably missed out on being offered support. I think I kind of like fell through the net in terms of that. And I don't think, to be honest, I don't think I really ever was offered support, whether that be like financial or mental health or anything. I know that I did have at the time when Macmillan were doing the grants and stuff, I think I had a financial grant, small one from Macmillan, but I think I fell through the net a little bit in terms of that journey where people tell you who you can go to and stuff. So I didn't really have much support at all.
Come on to the what happened next in the UK in a moment, but I'd just like to say a few words about a second sponsor of the show, Corporate Wellbeing Solutions. If you're a business owner or managing a team, it's worth checking out Corporate Wellbeing Solutions. They specialise in occupational health support, providing high quality, practical reports with a really fast turnaround. So you're not left waiting when you've got a live employee situation to deal with. They also offer an employee assistance programme, giving your staff access to qualified counsellors along with mental health and wellbeing support whenever it's needed. If you want straightforward, reliable support that actually helps you manage your people properly, have a look at Corporate Wellbeing Solutions and email them on ochhealth@corporatewellbeingsolutions.com. So when you got back to the UK and transferred your care over to the NHS, was that the end for you? Was it monitoring or what happened next?
Started my surveillance, so blood tests and scans every 6 months. I think I also had a colonoscopy when I first got back as well, I think. But it kind of went back into normal life, and I thought that it was just going to continue that way in terms of just surveillance and 5 years of remission I was given then. So that's what I thought, that's what I hoped for.
I'm guessing that wasn't quite as straightforward as that.
No, yeah, so I was having my 2 year surveillance scan. This was at the beginning of 2023. And, it was probably the first scan that I went into feeling quite normal. Obviously, everyone talks about scanxiety, and I was having that every time. But this one I went into, I felt great, to be honest. I felt really fit and healthy. I'd had no symptoms of anything. And I went into it completely blindly because yeah, as I said, I felt really good. But 9 days after that scan, I was at work and I got a call through from the hospital and they said, your surgeon needs to see you in the hospital next week. I think it was on a Thursday. And I kind of obviously you instantly know that's not good, because before that I would have just got a letter or something to say. And I think I said, it's got a bit of a blur, but I think I said, is it just a routine talk or something? And obviously they can't say too much on the phone, but I just remember their tone of voice. I obviously knew that something was wrong. So then I came home and I think I was going in on the Tuesday the following week. So I had that whole weekend of having no answers, and just knowing that clearly something was wrong. And at that point, you don't know how bad or serious it is as well. So you're just left in this unknown. I think I remember desperately trying to call my GP, asking if he could see anything on his system to try and find out what it might be, but he couldn't give me any answers either. So, yeah, I went in the following week.
That's really difficult, isn't it? It's something I work with in my counselling a lot, that fear of the unknown. Once you've got a plan and whatever it is, no matter how bad it is, you can start to process things. But fear is probably the one emotion that's difficult to deal with more than anything else, because you have no
Yeah.
control.
I truly believe that limbo phase, and I think this as well, because when I go back to when I was first diagnosed, I think the way it happened for me, the fact that I was really, really unwell but didn't know I had cancer until it had been removed, in a way skipped that mental battle of knowing I had it and waiting. So for me, that part of the journey, the most traumatic part was the build up and how unwell I was before. It was almost a bit of, not, I wasn't relieved I had cancer, but I had a relief that I had an answer and I had a step forward. Whereas this time, I faced that period of unknown. And I just think that period when you're waiting, don't have answers, is probably, I think, one of the hardest parts whenever you get a diagnosis, really, because your mind plays all those tricks on you. And until you have the answers, you almost say there's no point worrying, but obviously that's almost impossible.
Yeah, and that's what well-meaning people say to you, isn't it? Oh, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Everything will be okay. And it's like, how do you know? Because I don't know.
Yeah.
There's only one person who knows, and he's not seeing me till next week.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
I
definitely.
really remember that second phone call myself and my own situation. I had 18 months clear after my surgery, and I was weirdly driving past the local hospital working, and I got a phone call in the morning and asked to come in later that day and bring somebody with you. Thankfully for me,
Hmm.
that was only a few hours, so
Yeah.
but that bring somebody with you, that's not coming in to celebrate good scan results.
No,
And
no.
it's horrible, isn't it? Just your world drops out when you hear that come in next week, or come in, your surgeon or consultant wants to see you.
I think as well, when it's the second time or third time, or you know how many times, you almost go through that thing of being like, surely this can't be happening again. Because when the first time it happens, you've never experienced that before. The second time, you know how horrendous it is, and you just think, surely it can't be again. So,
Yeah, and I really resonate as well when you said I was going for my second sort of annual checkup. So it's been 2 years. I got
hmm.
caught with that with 7 years coming up for was it 7 years since diagnosis? Yeah, I'd been almost 5 years clear since my second lot of treatment, and I got told they'd found something on a scan. Whizzing very very forward, it ended up being benign after surgery. But just that you're almost blasé, aren't you? Because the phone call comes in and you're expecting a letter. Yeah, everything's okay. See you in 6 months, 3 months, 12 months, whatever it is. And then all of a sudden, it's like the box has just punched you in the nose, and it's like, well, where did that come from?
yeah, and I think now I look back on it, I think I naively really did not think that I was going to have a recurrence, because I think I probably just thought that it was unlucky enough and unusual enough for me to have had it the first time, especially because I didn't really do anything or live a life that you stereotypically brings it on. And so I think I just thought that there's no way that it would happen again. And I guess when you think of it like that, you're even more shocked because you haven't prepared yourself for the fact that it can.
Absolutely. It's difficult, isn't it? So, what were you told when you went back in the week afterwards, and what sort of happened from there?
So I went in and they said, to begin with, they just said, we've spotted something on your lung. So in 2 years, it had managed to travel undetected from my colon up to because it was a spread of the original cancer, but it'd gone to my lung with, completely undetected, which I think is a bit mental. But they also said that they'd seen something around my pelvic area, which they weren't sure kind of what that looked like. So they very quickly I went in for MRIs, PET scans, and waited for those results. And thankfully, they're not actually completely sure what it was on my pelvic area, because that turned out to be nothing, thankfully. Like, what they did actually see on my lung was just there, because they needed to double check that it was just isolated on my lung, which it was. So they said that I was to have an operation to remove that, which I had in the April. So I had kind of all of those answers in March. And I guess the good thing about having PET scans, as horrible as scans are, that could really show that it wasn't anywhere else in the body. So I was very, grateful for that. And yeah, I had the operation in the April. They removed it through keyhole. And then we kind of started on more conversations around whether or not I'd need treatment for that.
I sense from experience that hearing it could be surgically removed is always a bonus, isn't it? Of anything else, at least you know if it's out, it's out.
Yeah, I think that was a huge relief. I think that given how scared and worried I was, I think a couple of those things, like the fact that it was isolated on my lung, even though it was still terrifying that it spread, I think the fact that it was isolated on the lung and that it wasn't anywhere else and that I could have an operation were all factors that made me feel, I guess, happier with the outcome, as horrible as it was the second time round. And as much as it put me through the depths of going through it again, I was pleased that that was the outcome.
You mentioned potential treatment. What was the thought process there? Was it something that you needed, or was it advised, or was that a conversation you had? And was there any other factors that came into your sort of thought process about going through that?
Yeah, so they told me that the NHS kind of protocol is that anyone who's had a recurrence has to have a second round of chemo. I guess that's the preventative chemotherapy again. So we discussed chemo and I went in to see an oncologist about it, but I was 29 at the time of the recurrence happened. I hadn't had a family yet, and so obviously when it comes to treatment, fertility is a massive question. And that was one of the first things that was brought up with me, because they felt fairly certain that with the first round of chemo that I had, that my fertility and cycle and everything had been fairly protected. It was something that I took great care of protecting when I first went through treatment. Like, I had the fertility injections to suppress all of that. And it was something that I've made sure that I did everything I possibly could. So when the conversation came around again, they did kind of suggest that potentially my fertility may not stand for another round of chemo. So we kind of looked at all of the options really, because I think that given the situation as well, with the fact that it was isolated to the lung, the scan showed it wasn't anywhere else. They removed it. They were happy, afterwards with that they'd removed everything. We weighed it all up, and essentially I made the decision not to have more chemo, because I guess that for me, protecting a future family outweighed the evidence I had with preventing the cancer coming back. But what 29-year-old feels prepared to answer that question with probably not as much support as I needed really to have those answers? But it was the decision I made, and so far as it stands, I'm still happy that I made that choice.
That's a massive decision for anybody to make at any part of their life, let alone at 29 years old, who's been through 3 years of absolute torture and has thought they were just getting their life back on track, and then wham, here it is again. That's really difficult, and I don't know how you got through that. Were you offered any kind of support through that, mental health wise?
I don't know. I don't think throughout really any of my time journey since diagnosis I've been actually offered any support. I think I've kind of sought out my own support really. Whether that's me just learning new ways to deal with things and everything, but in terms of being offered, I don't think I really have been.
It feels like you've gone into sort of default survival mode of in the trench, and here we go, and I've just got to get through it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think that that is where mindset's so important to me. And I've done a lot of work on that and how I can cope with different aspects of it. And I'm stronger for it. But it's been me that's had to do that work with myself, really.
Fair play to you for doing that. That's some effort. It's a shame that you've missed out on the support that should be there.
Mm,
And I'm sure, as we'll get onto shortly, in your advocacy work, you push for that to be available for
yeah.
people in similar situations, because you know firsthand how difficult it is to deal with on your own.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think, as you said, that is probably, it's not my only reason now, but it was the number one reason that got me involved in advocacy work and wanted to do it, because I didn't have my voice or anyone's voice when I needed it, especially because of my age of diagnosis, being in a different country and everything. I didn't have any of that. And so if I can be that voice for somebody else, then I feel like that's fulfilled part of the purpose of me, I guess, going through this.
So tell us a little bit about the advocacy work you do. You've just told us why you sort of got involved with it. We know you
hmm
work at Mission Remission. Do you want to tell us a
hmm
little bit about your role with them first, what you do, and how that came about?
Yeah, so I started with Mission Remission in January. I'm the community manager there, so I work with all sorts of different people, all cancer survivors within our communities. That could be volunteers or ambassadors, but also trying to gain support with corporates and pharmaceuticals as well. So it's very rewarding. Like, and I'm meeting amazing people, all people who've gone through it and who are in remission and are facing, sadly, kind of similar to push for change for. So yeah, that's a big thing, and I'm really enjoying that. As well as that, my other kind of projects have been a big one, which goes back to why I kind of got involved with advocacy in the first place, was being involved with setting up Bowel Cancer UK's peer support line, which I truly believe peer support is game changer, and I think has been a game changer within the bowel cancer community. They didn't have one before, and I volunteer on that as well. I guess, like I said, so I can use my voice to try and help somebody else going through it. And also involved in a campaign with them as well, again, that I think is a game changer, especially within the stage 4 community. And that's something that they've got involved with Takeda Pharmaceuticals, and that's called Stage for You. It's basically for the stage 4 community to have self-awareness days and to acknowledge the changing emotions within the community. And I think anything else that I've done really with, I've done, you know, advisory in terms of peer support, media campaigns, and it all stems from the fact that I just believe that patient voice really has to be at the centre of work, whether that be through charities or business or pharmaceuticals and any healthcare, because if patient voice isn't at the heart of it, how do we really know that what they're creating is for the people who need it? So, I've gone through something that I wouldn't wish on anyone, and I'm not happy that I went through, but I've gone through now. And if I can have that feedback to help shape things, then I think that it's what we really need to do. As well as, I think that if you're in a position to advocate for yourself and others in life, because so many people aren't for themselves for whatever reason, I think if you can advocate, you're in an incredibly privileged position. So I think that advocating and raising awareness just creates better outcomes for more people, really.
Absolutely, and I know you were saying in your situation when you were first diagnosed, you didn't really get that time to think about it. It was bang bang, and you were in surgery. Those first few days are horrible if you've got a long period of time in between, and that peer support is
Mm.
just absolutely invaluable. And I think listening to you, I think me and you are going to speak a lot going forward because you're in a very similar sort of mindset to me. I
Mm.
don't know if you know, but I work with Action Kidney Cancer, and one of my roles there is to help with the message board forum, which is peer support. It's only patients or carers. And I remember going back to my second diagnosis, and I was told potentially I had up to 4 years because they didn't think it was curable. But thankfully, I qualified for a treatment at the Christie that was unique to them and it's not run anymore. But my consultant said to me, and anybody listening, I'm going to give a swear warning. I know you've heard me say this on the show before, but he said the treatment is effing shit and you don't have to do it because it is so brutal. And I was always going to do it because I've got a young family. But speaking to somebody on the Action Kidney Cancer Care Line, Rose Woodward, and then speaking to other patients who'd been through that treatment made me realise that, yeah, it is exactly what he says, but it's doable. And if you've got half a chance at the end of it of being in remission, then I'm going to take it. And yet it's tough, but you recover quite quickly after it, and then you go through the cycle again. But if I didn't have that peer support, yeah, I would have done it, but it wouldn't have been half as doable for me as it was. And I managed to connect with people who were having the same treatment at the same time
Mm-hmm.
in different wards. So we had that contact at 3 a.m. when you're feeling absolutely horrendous and thinking, I can't take any more of this. You just get on your message and bang, somebody else who gets it is there. And it's just so powerful, isn't it? You can have oncologists who are the best in the world who you can't get by without. You can have your family who are immense support. You can have your friends, but people who get it are just on a different level, aren't they?
Yeah, and I often say to when I'm speaking to people who have been through it, sometimes even if you're not having a conversation about cancer, just having a conversation with somebody who you do know has gone through it, you just have that automatic, I guess, like level of understanding. It's just a whole different conversation just because people get it. And the thing is until you go through it, you just don't understand it. And
Absolutely.
obviously that's no you it's no fault of anyone. You just, with anything, you don't understand it until you've been through it. So to speak to somebody who has, just, yeah, it's just amazing, really.
I do some work, occasionally do support face to face with different cancers and bring people together, and people are a bit wary of coming, and they come in and they're quite nervous and nobody really knows what to say, but within 5 minutes it's just free flowing and natural because there's just that instant connection, isn't there, like you say?
I think as well you can get yourself a bit nervous or worked up about sharing and stuff, but the minute you're in the flow of it and you've actually spoken to somebody and everything, I think it just comes a bit more naturally after a few minutes.
But it doesn't matter to another cancer patient, does it? Because they get it because
Mm-mm.
they've been there
Yeah,
themselves.
exactly. Yeah, definitely.
Great. Anything else you do advocacy wise that you really changed the way you look at things?
I think media work has been a big one. Again, going into raising awareness, but just because raising awareness and removing the stigma, and I guess raising awareness for happening in young people has been a big one. I have also been involved in creating a patient kind of advocacy advisory group with another amazing charity, Mind Over Cancer. And that group is actually called Shout because it's basically showing that we need to be listened to and our voices need to be front and center. And that's specifically targeted on mental health support following a cancer diagnosis, because I think obviously there's so much awareness about how it feels going through the diagnosis, but it's that time afterwards and sometimes long after your diagnosis. I think that we're finding that sometimes it takes people years and years to even start to process it. So mental health support needs to come in at any time, really. So that's been, yeah, another big one for me.
That's a really valuable organisation, and something that's going to be massive. As you know, I'm a mental health counsellor, and without going into individual clients, it's there's so many emotions down the line after you've recovered
Mm-hmm.
and you're in remission. It's there's so many, there's like guilt for people who haven't made it that far. Emotions around family members who've just got on with their life because it's over for them, but it's not for the patient. There's
Mm-hmm.
so many emotions, isn't there? Even like you say, so many years down the line.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. But it actually does seem as though I've started to notice a trend in the gap in mental health, but also peer support becoming more aware of, because I've had people approach me or had conversations because they want to implement more peer support services, especially in the hospitals. So I think over time that the awareness of this is starting to grow, and luckily it seems as though the gaps trying to be filled. It's just, I guess, finding resources and time and everything, and that's a huge challenge.
And that's the problem, isn't it? We were talking before we started recording this that hopefully there's starting to be a chink in social care changes, and
Mm-hmm.
finally that might be getting some attention without going political in any way on it. But funding for cancer support, it just seems to all rely, or majority rely, on charities, whether that be hospices, cancer specific charities. And it's hard, isn't it? Because there's only so much money in the country, and whatever your political persuasions are, any government has only got so much money to spend.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really difficult. And I think, harping back a little bit to what I was saying at the start of the show about the resilience room, companies, workplaces can do more. A lot of workplaces, bigger workplaces, have EAPs that have counselling support. All right, 6 sessions of counselling with an EAP isn't going to massively change the world for somebody with a cancer diagnosis, but it's a starting place for somebody. And also, if management are trained in well-being in the workplace, that could only help employees feel more comfortable in the workplace, and it can start there, can't it? It can help.
I think workplace is something that actually it needs to be really looked at because we spend so much of our time working. Sometimes people carry on working while they're going through their diagnosis or treatment or whatever. Some people can't stop. And I think if we were to kind of get it right in the workplace where people have got the right support and there's enough awareness there, then people would be in a much better position and maybe may not have to rely so much on outside support. But it comes down to companies being willing to learn more and take on more, I guess.
Yeah, and it depends on company size and things as well, doesn't it? But there's still little bits that people can do, even regardless of the size of company.
Yeah.
One thing we haven't touched on is how's your health now?
Yeah, good. So, touch wood, good. I've actually just had the date through for my next scan, which will be the 6th of August, and that one will be my 3 year. And it's a big one because as much as they all are, because if you get through them and it's clear, it's a big deal. But if this one is all clear, I go into my last 2 years of remission because my remission started over again when I had my recurrence, obviously. This time, if I'm all clear, I'll move to 12 monthly scans and blood tests rather than 6 monthly, which, even though that kind of brings on its own fears because you're not as regularly kind of monitored, it's also, I feel like I'm a little bit relieved that I can move out of just having 6 monthly limbo periods of my life, worrying about the next scan and it just being that cycle. So fingers crossed, I feel good and I'm hoping that it's all clear. So
You can start to plan for the future a little bit more, can't you? Or a little bit more of an extended period of time rather than
yeah,
living life 6 months to 6 months.
definitely. Yeah, it feels like it'll be, in a way, a big jump. And like, I'm sure that maybe when it comes to 6 months' time after that one, if this one's all fine, I'll probably be like, oh, where's my scan? Like, I want to know everything's fine, but I'm sure I'll adjust. And yeah, there's definitely so many positives to moving to yearly scans.
Well, good luck with it. I hope it goes
Thank you.
well. I'm not going to say it's fine because none of us know that, but
No.
there's one thing you learn as a cancer patient, isn't it? What you can or should and shouldn't say to each other.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and I think that even in my head, even though, like I say, I feel good and I'm hoping it will be fine. I learned the time when I had a recurrence not to convince myself it would be, but I do feel positive. So
Charlotte, thank you so much for your time today, and I'm sure our listeners will be inspired by what you've been through. And thank you for everything you do in the advocacy world. I'm sure our paths are definitely going to cross again in the future. I want to again thank our sponsors, the Resilience Room and Corporate Wellbeing Solutions. And also, I want to say that I hope you're enjoying the podcast out there listening. And if so, I'd like to ask a little favour. Could you please leave a review of the podcast on whichever platform you get it from? This helps raise the profile, enables more people to be interested in joining as a guest. If you want more information on the services I provide, such as counselling and public speaking, please visit my website on www.stevepointsoncounsellinandsupport.co.uk. I'd also love to hear about what subjects you'd like to hear about on future episodes. What have your struggles been? Anything you'd like to come on and talk about? If so, please reach out on info@stevepointsoncounsellinandsupport.co.uk. But that's it for today, and I will speak to you very soon.